Welcome, foolish mortals, to Midsummer Scream! You've gathered from creepy old crypts all over the world to meet some of the happy haunts who have brought our famous mansion to life on the big screen, complete with hot and cold running chills. Please welcome your hosts, your not yet ghost hosts, to the stage. From the Boo Crew Podcast, Lauren and Trevor Shand and Leone De Antonio.
Welcome, foolish mortals. How's everyone doing? Hey, I'm Leo.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Trevor, and we are Bloody Disgusting. It's a Boo Crew podcast, part of the Bloody FM podcast network. Every week on Apple, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts, we invite people into our home through a secret passageway in the wall of our living room and host conversations with incredible storytellers and creators who are inspired by the horror genre. They include everyone from Danny Elfman to James Wan, Elvira, Robert Englund, Eli Roth, musicians like Chelsea Wolfe, My Chemical Romance, Ghost, Phoebe Bridgers, Mike Patton, and hundreds more. If you haven't heard us before, we'd love to have you be part of the Boo Crew family. Now, part of the extended family of that now includes a brand new anthology horror audio fiction show we're doing called The Antiquarian of Sinister Happenings and Odd Goings-On that Lauren and I created, which just launched this weekend. The first 2 episodes are available now, starring Kate Siegel from Hush and The Haunting of Hill House, and Josh Rubin's Werewolves Within, he's in it too, and Joseph and Vanessa Winter from Shudder's Deadstream on the 2nd episode, so you can go check those out now. But enough about us, and we want to talk about you and everyone in this room who's here to celebrate Disney's Haunted Mansion. Woo! Hell yeah! And we got that brand new film based on the attraction. It's in theaters everywhere now. Now, isn't it just amazing how this ingenious theme park attraction has become a source of everlasting wonder, inspiration, and comfort for all of us in this room? It's a project that began in the 50s and included Walt's famous team of Imagineers, Harper Goff, Ken Anderson, Mark Davis, Ex Atencio, Claude Coates, Rolly Crump, and Yale Gracie, a magnificent theme song by Buddy Baker, and an unmistakable narration from the great late Paul Frees that has been ushering us into the world of dark magic and imagination since August of 1969. Although he sadly passed 3 years earlier prior to opening, it is arguably Walt's greatest masterpiece. Being in Southern California, lots of you here today grew up visiting the Haunted Mansion. Conquered fears was maybe what got you into all things spooky in the first place and created memories that have stayed with you all forever. I asked Lauren to marry me, actually, in our Doom Buggy as it traveled through the attic back in 2006. I love this. So this is a very long-winded way of saying the Haunted Mansion is important. And this new movie, directed by award-winning filmmaker Justin Simien, excels at capturing the mystique and wonder that has galvanized all of us for all these years and many more to come. Before we introduce our 2 special guests, let's roll the trailer of this amazing film.
When my son and I moved in here, it wasn't as warm as we hoped. Okay, I'm gonna light a vanilla candle, and it's gonna be a game changer. Let it go! And after midnight, the house comes alive.
This place is haunted!
We need your help.
It's time to assemble the dream team. We find someone who can communicate with these ghosts.
People used to eat here.
Told you she's good.
It's a dining room.
I found a professor who knows haunted mansions.
I've been dying to go to this place for years. Mystery lurks around every corner.
I can show you what happened, but it will cost you $3.
What? Wow. It's highway robbery.
Who said that?
You're not that scary. You're really not. terrifying. Can you turn around just while I finish this? Thank you.
Guys, is anybody else seeing this?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Hold on! If we don't solve this mystery, we're stuck here for eternity.
Surprise!
You're all in for a treat.
Disney's Haunted Mansion, everybody, yeah! All right, our very two special guests. So first of all, he is a Harvard grad who went from being an intern in PA to spending 9 years at DreamWorks, eventually making it onto the Hollywood Reporter's Next Gen list and promoted to senior VP. He oversaw projects from Steven Spielberg, the Transformers franchise, the Academy Award-nominated The Help, among many others. He now serves as president of the film company Rideback, producing Guy Ritchie's Aladdin, Adam Wingard's Death Note, and several more. He is revered in the industry for his instincts with story and a tremendous passion for film. Please welcome one of the producers of Disney's Haunted Mansion, Jonathan Eyrick. Also here with us, a multi-award-winning writer, director, and one of the most in-demand editors in Hollywood. Throughout his career, he's cut the best of the best at Sundance, Tribeca, praised for his work on the Netflix smash, the 5-time award-winning Dear White People, and the 13-time award-winning 2014 film it was based on. He has this remarkable intuition of igniting story through how he weaves it together. It is that sense of presentation and style of his that made the film All the Boys I've Loved Before on Netflix, which is a cultural phenomenon, and has found him working on projects including Drew Barrymore's, Toni Collette, Bill Paxton, Steven Soderbergh, George Clooney, Spike Jonze, the list goes on. He's the editor for The Haunted Mansion. Say hello to the legendary Philip Bartell. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us on behalf of myself and the Boo Crew here and all this audience. We're huge fans of the attraction, and those who have seen the film cannot help but fall in love with it, including us, who saw it twice. So, that said, do not pull on the safety bar. We will lower it for you as we get this extraordinary film underway here. We would love to know about your experiences, your personal experiences with the ride itself, both of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy for me. I mean, again, we're so happy to be here. I'm a huge Halloween person, so these feel like my people out here. My mom used to make a haunted house in our neighborhood for all the kids in our neighborhood. I now have taken on the role, my street in Los Angeles, I basically make everyone decorate our street. We host the entire canyon that I live in for Halloween, so... But no, the first time I was in the park, I was 7 years old, and it was my favorite ride, and I think getting to go on it at that age, I think, is a really specific thing too, because it is terrifying when you're 7 years old. And it only lasts for about another year or two. You know, by the time you're 9, you kind of act like you're too cool for it. And then, you know, you start to feel the nostalgia for it. It starts to put a smile on your face. And I think going on it over the years is kind of what we tried to encapsulate in this movie, which is the tone of the ride. It is terrifying when you're a kid. It's still sort of scary, spooky when you get older. It's just fun and nostalgic when you're an adult. And I think it's trying to capture all of that in a movie. How do we deliver on that? So when you see the movie, you feel the same way. You know, and I have a 7-year-old. He will not watch this movie. He is terrified. He's terrified of the trailer. But I know in a year or two, it's going to be sort of perfect level scares for him. You know, and again, as an adult, like it just gives me all the feels I had when I went on the ride for the first time as a kid. So.
Do you have a favorite part of the attraction that you love the most?
Well, after hearing about your engagement story, I mean, I feel like I have to say the attic, so I'd be a bad person if I didn't. But I think the stretching room when I was a kid, you know, I think that was the part where the first time you go in there and you genuinely are not sure how you're going to get out, you know, like that level of dread. And I think that's, again, why the attraction's so genius. You know, it's like you know about the history, obviously. You guys are probably more steeped in it than anyone. But that the idea of grim, grinning ghosts, you know, that they couldn't decide, should this be scary or should it be fun? Should it be funny? Should it be terrifying? And the fact that they could weave both together, like that was the genius of it. They had so many creatives who were on both ends of the spectrum, and ones who wanted to sort of push the horror, they had ones who wanted to push the fun and the comedy of it. And I think that's what makes it so special. And again, we tried to bring that into all the people that worked on this film, that everyone sort of brought their own unique point of view to it, so you could get that very unique tone sort of under Justin's direction. And I think that was the great thing about having a director who loved the ride. He was always trying to chase that same feeling.
And how about yourself, Will?
I was, I think, 8 or 9 when I went to Disney World for the first time, and I was terrified of going on Space Mountain. My sister, who was 2 years younger, was all about going on Space Mountain, and so I was just like, I don't want to go. But Haunted Mansion, I was like, take me to that. I could not get to that soon enough. I've just always loved things that scare me. I've always loved horror films. And so the first time I rode that, I was in heaven, and especially the cemetery at the end with all the ghosts flying around. I just loved that I could tell that it was tactile. It was homemade, and it was there, but I couldn't tell how they'd done it. And that's what I also like about some parts of our movie too, just that there's lots of practical effects in and amongst the CGI.
I think one of the things that makes the ride so special is that once you get into that dune buggy, the whole world is closed off, and the whole ride, unlike a lot of different theme park rides and dark rides, especially at the time, then all of a sudden becomes just about you, more so than any other that I've experienced. And that ghost host is talking to you and whoever you're with in that dune buggy, making it a really intimate experience that is very, very unique. What is it about the attraction that you find people hold on to so dearly?
Well, that for one. No, I mean, I think it's a little bit of what Phil was getting at. I think the ballroom is a great example of this too, where the Pepper's ghost trick.
Yeah.
You're looking down and you can see ghosts there. They're really there. And again, you're not sure how they did it. It's funny you mentioned getting the dune buggy, because I remember the first time riding as a kid, I just thought something was going to come from behind me the whole time. and now you sort of forget that feeling almost. You go on it and you're like, well, I know that's not how this happens, but first time you get on, you're sort of trapped there, you're in the dark, and you have that feeling. But no, I think it is that sense of, it's really there, and I'm not sure how they're doing it. The candelabra at the end of the hallway, the sort of tricks of the eye, and like it's so real that I think it feels different than any of these other attractions, And again, there's obviously a lot that you go on. There's a lot that are just about sort of that immediate jump scare. This doesn't rely on jump scares. I think there's something sort of timeless about the ride for that reason. But.
Yeah, they actually, one morning we went to Disneyland during post-production at 5 in the morning and got a tour of the mansion. And just to finally see how some of the stuff was done, I still didn't necessarily understand all of it, but was a real highlight of this entire adventure. Just
Isn't that wild? That's something that I marvel about too, that even the decades ago that ride was created, that the effect is still the same for audiences today. They haven't changed it all that much really at all, and it's still just as impactful as it always been. It's amazing. I would like to just reference that obviously like in 2003, it was the first time that we had the chance to experience a filmic version of The Haunted Mansion. It was Rob Minkoff's film with Eddie Murphy, which I hold dearly. I know the rest of you hold dearly as well. We collect stuff from that film, still costumes and props and Rick Baker and all that great stuff to this day. A lot of people hold that movie as a classic as well. And it wasn't until Comic-Con, I believe in 2010 in San Diego, where at the end of a Tron Legacy panel, that Guillermo del Toro came out at the end and said, this is my next movie, it's going to be The Haunted Mansion. In 2015, it was revealed Ryan Gosling was attached to it, who's a huge fan of the ride. He goes on it all the time with headphones on in his dune buggy. He made a band inspired by it called Dead Man's Bones. And this is kind of the trajectory that this film had taken. Now, as far as you guys are aware, in that whole time span, what were the challenges and different iterations that kind of led to this moment and the film that we see today?
Yeah, it's interesting because, we were not a part of those projects in any way. So my first sort of contact with this project, it was, again, always something I dreamed about working on, but there had been producers on it before, there had been Guillermo's version before, and they just sort of hit that development hell, as we call it in film, where they just couldn't get over the hump. There wasn't a script that anyone felt confident about. I don't think sort of the shared vision was there. And I just finished making Aladdin for Disney. We had a great experience on that and sort of a great result for the studio. And they were suddenly open to having producers come in with takes on the property. So it wasn't just us at Ryback, my partner Dan Lin, it was a number of producers they sort of talked to and said, listen, if you have a way in, this is something we really want to make again. It's going to be the 20th anniversary of the film. We feel like it's the right time. We just need a great story. We need a great way in. And we knew of a writer who we were very close to. She'd worked with our company before, Katie Dippold, who, again, in the world of massive fans of the ride, she is up there. You know, she will make her drive down to the park just to ride the ride 3 or 4 times, and then she goes home. So, you know, we knew we had somebody who not only revered the ride, but also she has a great humorous tone. She wrote The Heat. She worked on Ghostbusters with Paul Feig, but she is a real horror fan as well. So it sort of felt like, you know what, she's the perfect person for it. If she can crack it, let's give it a try. And she really had a wonderful way in, which is the bones of the movie you see. And that was sort of the beginning of it for us. So, you know, I don't have a whole lot of context for sort of what happened before. We never read those scripts or anything because we really wanted to just go in, you know, with this kind of totally original idea and see if the studio liked it. And ultimately they did. And, you know, we weren't put on as producers until they said, this is the way to go. And Katie started writing the script. And then soon after we found our filmmaker, Justin Simien.
Got it. Well, tell us about finding Justin. What made him the perfect person to kind of elevate what Katie had put together?
Yeah, no, it was amazing. I'd seen his work before and been a really big fan. I had seen Dear White People, the show, and the feature film, and you know, knew he could do comedy. Actually, only in talking to him, I had heard about the movie Bad Hair, so I was like, wait, now I got to go watch it. And it's incredibly stylish. It's wonderfully made. It's scary, but it's satirical. It's smart. And, you know, there was sort of a cleverness to Katie's script, too, that he was just drawn to. And creatively, it sort of felt like, okay, there's not that many people who've done comedy and horror and sort of drama, because there is real emotion in this movie as well. And then when he told us he actually worked at the park during his college career, and that was his job, and at every single break as a cast member at the park, he would go over and ride the ride. Just like, okay, now we have the person. He also has a lot of family from Louisiana and New Orleans specifically, and I think also wanted to make sure he got the flavor of New Orleans in this movie in a real way. And suddenly it just felt like kismet. All these things were adding up, and it just felt like this is the perfect person who loves the attraction, understands the tone, has done work that sort of shows how we can excel in both ways, and again, has a connection that goes back to college and actually working at the park.
That's fantastic. And Philip, you've had a little bit of a history working with Justin in the past. What do you like about working with him and his vision just in general, the way he works?
Yeah, I've worked with him since his first feature, Dear White People, and from jump, reading that script, I thought, oh, here's someone with a very distinctive point of view that is unlike my own. I love working with him because he likes to collaborate. He's really funny. He's fun in the room. He's low pressure. We're just both like chill, but like to do the work, enjoy working together. And it's just, yeah, it's his, that he brings enough different things to the table to keep me excited and engaged and vice versa. But he's just a blast.
That's great, that's great. Oh, it looks like it, for sure. I'd like to roll to a clip if we could. We're gonna talk about some characters in the film. Can we roll sketched?
Eyes. Far apart, close, average.
I think normal, average.
Okay, average eyes.
But they were a bit sunken into the recesses of his
Deep eyes.
ocular cavity.
Deep sunken eyes.
It's like a raccoon. Like
Beady
when they
eyes.
sit back. His eyes were doing that. And no eyelids.
So they're into his skull, no eyelids. What about his nose?
No nose. You know.
No nose.
Why would he have a nose?
Oh, he was smiling.
The man who mugged you was smiling.
But he didn't have lips. So it was kind of like a perpetual smile of sorts. It's kind of like, yeah, like that. Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
No lips, why not? Why would he have lips? Is this the man who mugged you?
Wow! You just did that just now? This is amazing.
You know what would be fun? See him with skin.
The good old Hatbox Ghost, right? That's become a thing of legend amongst fanatics.
Can I interrupt really quickly? I have never been able to like watch an audience from
that's cool.
watching it. That was I want to touch screen it like that.
So the Hatbox Ghost kind of, an urban legend. It was a few pictures had existed of when originally it first showed up on the ride shortly after it opened, and then they yanked it out, apparently due to some mechanical issues that didn't quite get the illusion the way they wanted it to, and then it ended up being put back in the ride in May of 2015, much to fan demand. Was there, a reason about casting the Hatbox Ghost and making him a prime character? Was that always part of the script, that he was a central figure?
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, Katie was a massive fan of the ride, sort of knew all that history, and there was never anyone else that it was going to be. So it was always going to be the Hatbox Ghost for all those reasons. But I think also it's the one, character that feels the most ominous. Sure. Again, there's a lot of martini swilling ghosts in there in the graveyard, and everyone's sort of having a good time. Like, there's something slightly more ominous about the Hatbox Ghost, which again is part of the whole legend that was built around it. So I think it was always clear that had to be the villain.
Sure.
And honestly, the biggest thing that changed was how much presence the villain had in the movie. So there was early on, as you see from the scene, they're really trying to find out the identity of the Hatbox Ghost, but the movie really played in sort of early scripts as a true mystery, so you actually didn't really know who was haunting them for much of the movie. And honestly, our first test screening, it just felt like the audience wanted more of the Hatbox Ghost. They wanted his presence in the movie, they wanted him to be a bigger character, they wanted to know more about his backstory, so that was something we sort of built out over time during production, and thanks to the skills of Philip, built out over in editorial as well, but it felt like everyone was craving that. You just wanted a big bad in this movie, you wanted it to be the Hatbox Ghost, and you wanted to know more about him.
Yeah.
I'm casting this character, played in this movie by the great Jared Leto, who's phenomenal. And he's an actor who gives it his all in every role he plays. What was it about him? What was it? How was this character used? His persona, was it motion capture? Was it mostly visual effects, or was his voice actually used for the film? They got productive in his
It was, yeah, it's funny. So many people are like, whose voice did you get for Jared Leto? I'm like, Jared Leto? That's why we cast him. If you see the movie, you will not recognize his voice at all. He was really specific about it. Again, to your point, he gives it all on every project, and there's nothing where he says, oh, this is a couple days of a voice acting, motion capture. He goes all in. He wants to know the backstory of the character. He wants to craft that voice, and as you know, he's a musician as well, so he has his own sound studio. So initially there was a couple recordings we did, and then he was like not happy with it, and he was like, let me go off and do my own thing. And so he kind of created this voice in his own sound studio, and then sent it back to our director Justin. I love what you're doing at this, and then sort of crafted it from there. But really, he disappears as far as an actor and sort of the voice that's kind of what he does in all of his roles. So it was fun watching him sort of, have this very nefarious kind of, he was talking about even the evil queen in Snow White. He's like, I want to go back to the feel of early villains and early animation. That's what I want this to feel like, sort of timeless and scary in that way. So that's kind of where it came from. But yeah, in terms of facial capture, all that was used for modeling for the Hatbox Ghost's expressions and character as well.
And what was that like, Phil, to kind of bring him to life throughout the edit?
It was interesting. The last time that he recorded, we did it at his studio, and we just we'd met him at the first record, but this is the first time where it was just me and Justin and him and his engineer, and I just remember him walking in. We were sitting down, shook his hand, and I looked into his eyes, and it was just like I was looking forever. It was very intense and yet friendly at the same time. It was a lot of fun. It was cool seeing how he could adjust. He tried some things out with an accent initially, but we ended up with what we've got now. I just like that it feels very. It does have an old-fashioned feel to it. It's like an old dandy of sorts or something.
Yeah.
It was cool.
We want to dive into the rest of the ensemble, right? You got Rosario Dawson, Emmy-winning Tiffany Haddish, Oscar-nominated Lakeith Stanfield, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito, the Oscar-winning Jamie Lee Curtis is in there too, and some other surprises that we won't reveal in case anyone hasn't seen the movie. We don't want to ruin it for you. Tell us about putting together the cast and the chemistry and heart that you guys were looking for to materialize, so to speak.
Yeah, this was always an ensemble. Sort of the way Katie always crafted it was you had this protagonist, Ben, who is somebody who is kind of on the verge of not sure if they even want to live anymore, and I think that's what's fun about the ride. It's sort of you're confronting death in this ride. It's what we wanted the movie to be as well, and wanted this experience to be in confronting death. You sort of choose life again, and it was very much the arc for this character. But it was always about this ensemble that quite honestly he gets trapped in this house with what he presumes to be some of the most annoying people he could ever be trapped with, and then they sort of form this surrogate family over the course of the movie, and it really feels like this is the reason I do need to keep going, that I do need to sort of choose life. So that ensemble had to be comedic, they had to be lovable, they had to be able to be sort of grating at times on Ben, but at the same time we had to love them as characters. So in casting Ben, honestly, that was a conversation with Justin early on. Like, he felt very strongly about Lakeith and about an actor who he'd seen do incredible comedy in Boots Riley's film and on Atlanta, but somebody who has real gravitas. It felt like you had to have that. You had to have a performance that could be grounded in this movie if you were going to care. And for those of you who hadn't seen it, there is a great, really emotional payoff at the end of the movie that I think gets people every time, and I think you earn it solely because of Lakeith's performance. And then it was really trying to figure out, okay, what is the sort of 1 + 1 = 3 casting around them that can sort of make this movie feel like the event that we wanted it to be. And honestly, it was sort of just was going out to all those roles at the same time. I have to say it was one of the crazier things I've ever had to do as a producer, because availabilities and schedules and all these things that unfortunately don't line up as easily as you wish they did most of the time, but it was amazing what we were able to pull together with them. And I think getting somebody like Rosario, who has just like such class, and again, it feels so wonderful and motherly. Our young actor Chase, who was incredible in Underground Railroad, and it was funny, there were some reviews that were like, I'm annoyed they cast a teenager for the 9-year-old because he's so good in the movie. And you're like, no, he's 9. Like, he's just an incredible actor who's like sort of precocious and wonderful.
Suits the character.
Amazing in the film. And then, Owen is obviously comic relief. His character was crafted a little bit by Owen as well, which was great. In the first conversations Justin had with him, there was, again, a little bit of a spoiler alert, but he's a bit of a con artist as a priest. It's kind of why he's dressed even the way he is. In the movie, you sort of know there's something off about this guy, but that wasn't the case originally. He was sort of just a bad priest, was kind of the joke. And Owen loved this idea. He's like, no, I'm always in it for the con. I want to be part of that. And so much of the comedy came out of that, and that was really Owen's idea he brought to the table. And then with Madame Leota, honestly, it was all of us, but the studio as well. It was like, if we could get the preeminent scream queen in the world to be Madame Leota, it was kind of like, who's got the gravitas to be her, but also it was a sort of funny part too. There was some comedic chops, and you wanted just an icon in that role since it's such an important part of the ride. We couldn't have anticipated that she was about to win an Oscar as well, so sort of everything fell into place, which was great, but it always felt like that was such an amazing get. And then we had this older character, Professor Bruce, that we were sort of just who feels, and funny and lovable in that part. He was just a grouch, he's a grump. In one scene you'll see him, he's wearing a clear raincoat and a clear raincoat hat. He's just a guy who prepares for the worst at all times. And Danny's one of those guys who's just so lovable, who'll go for it every time. And then, Tiffany was one of the easiest people to cast too. We sort of always knew she just felt like the part. And I had made a movie with her right before this, and she was sort of already campaigning and auditioning for it. She loved Justin. She wanted to be a part of this. And the comedic chops you knew she had, but there's a scene, this ghost wink scene that you'll see in the movie too, where you see what a great actress she is, and really can deliver something that is really tear-jerking.
So many moving moments in this movie.
Was it hard to find a balance between making this a family film and making it scary to appease that Haunted Mansion fan that wants to see something scary, but to appeal to a wider audience?
Yeah, this is a good question for you, because obviously a lot of that is dials you turn in editorial. You have to shoot the movie that you believe in, but does that joke belong there? Does it not? There's jokes that are on the cutting room floor because you're like, I don't know if this scene should be funny, even though that joke's really funny.
So many jokes.
And that's the hard thing. So you're always turning those dials. It's funny, even the opening scene in his bedroom that the young boy goes into, where you see the bride for the first time. I'm still like, is that too scary for, you know, a family? Is that too scary for a
It's awesome.
7-year-old?
It's awesome.
You know, you are trying to turn those dials every time. But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk even more to how to find that tone with Justin.
Well, I mean, it's how to find the tone, I think, just in kind of what we're all feeling in our guts, but also then when we screen it with audiences, it's like, you know, if this joke doesn't play, if, you know, Justin or whomever wanted to fight for, let's try it one more time and see, and perhaps by shifting other things around that particular moment, it may play better. And the other challenges of the audiences usually vary as well. So, yeah, it was especially in like the last third when we've got so much happening, and we don't know what. Or we were just trying to figure out, you know, do we need a funny thing here? Do we not need a funny thing here? Should we just kind of keep on the action, suspense, scary stuff, or you know, does a joke work? It was the scene like when Lakeith is kind of talking about his past, his sad situation. Don't want to spoil anything, but I mean, Danny has a couple of really great lines in there, and was it like, is it too much? Is it too crass because of what he says? But then watching it with an audience, we hear afterwards like that was one of their favorite scenes, and it was because of that, because that's what you do with your close friends who kind of become your chosen family. You are able to, like, you know, in a really emotional moment, make a joke and you both laugh and you just feel better.
There's an interview where Justin actually names you as the unsung hero of the entire movie. And I'm wondering, just walk us through a little bit of that process where you're working a movie that's a big deal studio film, obviously for Disney, with a very precious IP, like the Haunted Mansion, and kind of the responsibility and process behind the testing and experimentation and what that is like as an editor to kind of keep going back and forth and revisiting over and over again.
Well, first of all, he said that because we watch RuPaul together. We're really good friends. It's, I mean, it was terrifying at times, to be honest, because, you know, when we realized that we needed to get more Hatbox in it, I hadn't been on a film this large before, so it's like, okay, how much of this is falling on me individually to figure out how to address these situations? But through all the collaboration that went on, we kind of came to new ideas, new things that we wanted to shoot, in terms of getting Hatbox in there, but also juggling everyone's storyline, because there's so many characters, so many things going on, but still Justin's main goal throughout all of it was keeping Lakeith, Ben's story clear, and his relationship with Chase, with Travis, the young boy, because that was one thing that Justin said spoke to him, was seeing a black man and a black boy kind of having a great father-son-ish kind of relationship and seeing that develop. But yeah, the testing, it got better. I was just kind of like, every time we tested it, we got better scores and felt that we were improving, so we felt like we were on the right track. But you know, like, the first time you put it in front of people is terrifying. The first time I put it in front of a director, I always warned them, like, this will be the worst it will ever be, and it will only get better. And that's you know, generally speaking, what happened. So that was the kind of thing I tried to keep in mind during moments of stress, was like, it will get better. This day might be particularly hard because we don't necessarily have the answers today, but we will figure them out tomorrow. Or if we don't have the answers, we'll test it like this, and that perhaps will help us get the answers. So it just kind of like got I don't know about easier, because it was always hard work, but it just kind of continued being more productive as it went.
Are there any stories from the set of things happening that weren't planned that were spooky?
Spooky.
Like maybe any paranormal stories?
I think Lakeith definitely had a bunch, and he's a bit of a superstitious person as well, but there was a lot of weird stuff that was happening, like in his apartment, things weren't working. As soon as he moved down to Atlanta, he was like very convinced that like we were in a full, he's in his own haunted house world, and brought it up many, many times, and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Do you want to move? Do you want to go somewhere else? I'm just telling you, weird things are happening, so. But I don't know, I think it kind of gets into everyone, you know. I mean, the probably second month we were shooting was October 2021, and I remember getting to shoot in our cemetery scene on Halloween with the hitchhiking ghost there, and you're like, this is so cool. This is exactly what you wish you were doing every Halloween. Everybody here, you wish you were there on set that day. Like, it's just exactly where you wanted to be. So it felt like we had that sort of spooky energy around the movie, even if some of us maybe believed more than others that certain things were happening. So
I love I'd love to know, shooting in the French Quarters, New Orleans, and all this beautiful, you see a lot of the culture, you see a lot of the traditions that they have there in terms of like funerals, and it's a great part of the movie. But I'm really curious, the star of the movie, the house, the Haunted Mansion, is it a real location? Is it a real house you filmed in? At least the exteriors.
The exterior was on the studio lot, but we did build it. So the full driveway, the first floor of the house was all built, and then all the rooms were built on stages very close by. So that was all in Atlanta. The very top of the house, you never build all that, sort of becomes CG, and thanks to our amazing VFX supervisor and our team, I think it all looks very seamless. But all that lower part is practical. So we wanted to build that, and then where the driveway sort of connects to the entrance gate, that gate then ties into an area outside of New Orleans that we shot, sort of where that driveway is, where all those willow trees are hanging over. Both gates were there in New Orleans. So you actually, for the chair ride, for instance, she goes from a set interior to an exterior set to actually being outside of New Orleans, all in like basically 3 shots. So, it's always trying to piece it together, but we did love shooting a lot of this practically. Every single one of those sets was real, everything was there, even they were even all connected, which I think was a really important thing. Our production designer, Darren Guilford, had thought this early. A lot of times in these big movies, you'll build a room here, and then a small set will have a room here, and another. He was like, it's all got to connect. You have to be able to go from one room to the next. You have to be in the library and be able to see across the hallway into the ballroom. That's what's cool, because you can't actually do that in the ride, but you kind of always wish you could. You wish you could be inside there. And it was kind of the dream for all of us, being on set, where you got to walk into the Haunted Mansion every day, and feels like a real house that you're in. So, the stretching room was just off the library. All these were connected on the set, and I do think that actually makes a big deal. It makes a big deal for the filmmaker, Justin, but it makes a big deal for the actors too. I think they just love being in a real environment, because we're so used to these days putting up 3 blue walls and having a couple props and, hey, VFX will take it over. And we didn't do that in this film. So.
Let's take a look at the interior of the Haunted Mansion right now with a clip we have called Trapped.
Come on, what's up with the fencing?
Come on, let's go. Is anybody else seeing this?
Yeah, I'm seeing it.
Leaving us already.
Man, here's your dress. If you make it out, get the group manor.
I do love surprises, and I've got a great one coming up for you.
Yo, Travis!
Quicksand!
Travis!
Oh my God, dynamite!
Travis! Look for a way out! We gotta go! We gotta go! Now!
Get to the gargoyles fast!
Travis, we gotta grab one of the gargoyles! That's how we get out of here! That's great! Now hold on! Don't look down!
Not today, Satan. You better give it. I rebuke you. Not today. Oh, those teeth look really sharp then.
Hey, painting lady! What do we do now?
Whatever you're gonna do, do it fast. Come on, hurry.
You might want to give that ceiling a second look.
Well, you could end up like my husband.
You haven't seen anything yet.
Disney's Haunted Mansion.
They're already dead.
You're gonna be deader. Okay.
So the big question is the haunted room actually stretching, or is it just our imagination?
Or is it just VFX in that scenario? But those sets were all connected there, and it was really fun to be there. And I think everybody does probably know the ride really well. But even all 4 things on the floor are what is at the bottom of the stretching painting. So there's the quicksand, there's the sharp graves. So we even had the nod there in terms of like what the sort of antagonism was going to be for Lakeith and Chase trying to get out of the stretching room. But that was just really fun. Like, we had a great time. Justin had an amazing time on this movie. And again, you're just trying to capture that fun and the flavor of the ride. And you come out of the ride, you have a smile on your face, you want to go right back in, and you're trying to kind of bottle that up in this movie.
And it's not only that, but it's the angles that you're showing us. The angles of which we're experiencing the set feel familiar to us too. It's when we walk up to the mansion, you've got that same shot of what it's like walking through New Orleans Square and approaching the mansion. Talk about designing that feel for us in the edit.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a lot of Justin and our director of photography, Jeffrey Waldron. I mean, kind of creating those, especially towards the end of the film, there's a shot that's exactly out of the ride where you see the ghost dancing in the ballroom. And so it was just trying to use as many of those shots as possible. As often as possible without, that getting old. but just, things that Justin just wanted to keep reiterate, keep expressing visually our love for the ride. And so we just, anything that was like that, we made sure to use.
Was there anything in particular about the flow of the ride itself that informed you in the edit at all?
I don't think so. I mean, it's the overall tone of the film. That was the main thing. I don't think.
I would say the only thing that probably did was, from what we learned in the very first preview till the end, the movie didn't end in the cemetery originally, so that was something we sort of discovered in terms of like, how do we make the third act feel bigger? How do we deliver on some of the Hatbox Ghost stuff that clearly they were craving? Sure. And that originally it ended in the basement. And when we sort of went back for additional photography and we were reworking certain things, we did think, the ride ends in the cemetery. Like, let's have this movie end in the cemetery. It's going to be big and fun and sort of feel like you do when you come out and, to your point, when you get to the end of the ride and all of a sudden, like, you see the sky, it feels huge to you, especially when you're a kid on the ride. We wanted that feeling as well, so I do think even just sort of the ride you go on, ending there, that did inform some of the changes we made for the third act.
Yeah.
I believe there's 5 Haunted Mansion attractions around the world. Was there any inspiration taken from any of the other parks' attractions?
The only big one, which, as you'll see, Crump Manor, for those who haven't seen, is the exterior of the Haunted Mansion in Orlando. So it's funny, I did go to that one when I was 8 years old and then totally forgot because I've been to the one here in California a million times. And then when you look it up, you're like, oh right, it's sort of this Gothic brick mansion. You kind of forget what the exterior looks like if you're not from the East Coast. So we did want to make sure there's obviously tons of fans that are used to going to the one in Orlando and have that as their association of the Haunted Mansion, not the sort of New Orleans feel that all of us know in Southern California. So that was kind of the one big nod to make sure that mansion looked exactly like the Orlando one.
And tell us about the way that the team and how important it was to the team to have all those nods to the original ride. You've done it through production design, you've done it ingeniously through little subtle hints, not necessarily straight up dialogue, little moments in the film that we just feel familiar and we recognize instantly. Was that something that was evolved over time, or did you add things continually to that, or was that all in Katie's original version?
Certainly a lot was, because she was such a huge fan, but I think Justin brought a ton of that to the table as well as a fan of the ride himself. Again, the idea of sort of Pepper's ghost trick being like the inspiration for Justin of how we do the effects, all those ghosts you see in the movie, like these are real actors in makeup, in prosthetics that we shot, and then you sort of add digital elements to them to make them sort of feel a bit more ethereal, but Justin's like, I need them there, like we can't just shoot a bunch of hallways and have no ghosts there, like I want actors cast. And so I think that was a lot of it for him, just making sure you had all those the feel of the ghost was there. But then our production designer Darren Guilford, he is obsessed with the ride. All the door handles are exactly the same, the wallpaper is exactly the same. Actually, there's a couple custom wallpapers he made for the ride, for the movie, that you're like, this should be in the ride. It feels so much like it, So I think there was just a lot of people who loved it that tried to put as many of those into the movie as possible. And even the sequence you just saw, that is our no windows, no doors sequence. You sort of knew you were going to have that at some point in the movie. It felt like every sort of element that you experienced that you loved from the ride, we just want to make sure there was something that felt like it was there for the fans.
And then certainly our composer, Chris Bowers, brought the Grim Grinning Ghost theme to life throughout the film in such a, I think, larger way than any of us imagined. I think we kind of hoped for it, but like when I suddenly started hearing his cues, it was like, oh, this just is something that's so indicative of what makes the ride great. Is this theme.
And the way that he wove it through is very inventive and creative ways. It's not just the typical play the theme. It's really, really cool. I'm wondering, was there anything that was actually removed physically from the original ride and placed in the movie? An actual prop from the attraction?
There was not. We could have. You know, there was talk of that at times. But you don't want to do anything to the ride. You don't want to do anything that would detract from it in any possible way. So, but honestly, it was going through, and we went once in post-production, but we went in prep as well. Height of COVID, when the park was shut down, we went to the ride also, which by the way is a weird experience because there's not even an animal at Disneyland at that time. Because there's no food, so there's no birds. It's the weirdest thing in the world. And again, it was a weird time for all of us, but we did get to go through there, and you look at the Raven, and our production designer's like, oh, we got to have that on top of this chair, and you look at all these little details, and just one after the other, oh, we could use that, oh, we could use that, you know. So, we were able to recreate these things, very easily, but so we didn't actually take them out of there, but sort of in some way we did. We really did go through like piece by piece and sort of look at all the things that we could have and that could inhabit our own mansion.
Sure. Was there any? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
As we saw from the clips and the trailer, I mean, you could look at the ride and look at all these details from the ride. These small, like the paintings, the statues, the candelabra, the ghosts. It seems like you guys pulled off some serious Disney magic and somehow pulled off every single aspect of that ride into this movie. It all plays a role, either a character or to tell the story, move the story forward. But I would love to know, what was the most challenging aspect of production involving any of these effects and actors?
Well, when you started with the most challenging production, just making a movie in COVID period was probably the hardest part. In terms of the effects and the actors, it's funny. I mean, I think we were so well prepped on this movie. Pre-production went so extraordinarily smoothly. I think Justin is very detail-oriented, and again, I think having gone to the ride again and again, I think he knew exactly what he wanted. I think you see a sequence like the attic sequence with the bride, and we sort of knew, the idea, and for those who haven't seen the movie, we didn't want the ghost to just be present all the time. So I think a big thing was sort of like when you go on the ride, like you feel like you're haunted because you can't see the ghost, and I do think a lot of ghost movies love to show you the ghost right away. The idea of this is unless you go to the other side, unless you go to the ghost realm, you can't see the ghosts, but you have to feel their presence. So I think that was a thing. And again, trying to mimic that feel of the ride. The attic scene, I think, does that really well, where you only get to see the bride in reflections during that sequence, but there's sort of scattered mirrors here and there, so you can see her, and then you can certainly feel that terror when you can't see her. But I think that was a bit of the challenge of the movie too, which was, don't just give everybody the ghosts right away. You sort of have to earn it. Yes, and eventually we're going to go to the other side. You're going to see the ghost realm. You're going to get to sort of live with all these ghosts, but it's got to be sort of a slow burn to get there. So I think it was just balancing, like, how do you have the effects and how do you see them in the right way without giving it all away too early?
I was wondering if you can comment on the overall personality of the camera and the experience that you intended the viewer to have and the experience that you do give the viewer. There's all sorts of cool camera tricks, there's great rotations, there's Dutch angles, there's all these things that are kind of designed to unsettle and invoke certain emotions, especially when we get to things like Regions Beyond, and the editing just goes crazy. There's all sorts of things going on. Talk a little bit about that personality and that journey that you wanted to give us through that camera.
We wanted, I guess, in terms of the ghost realm, we wanted the movie to feel distinctly different when Ben finally gets there. And so the entire lighting scheme changes. We add a little bit of like flicker effects to just make it seem different. And gosh, I'm trying to think what else.
I mean, there's the lens effect that we use for the flashback. So we sort of get told a story by Madame Leota, where you get to sort of see a little bit of the history. You get to see a little bit of the history of Gracie.
It's very cool.
And it really is meant to feel like that was all shot sort of through her crystal ball.
Yeah.
But that actually was a practical lens. It was a lens that Justin and our director of photography, Jeffrey Waldron, chose. It would have that sort of almost sort of big sort of, on the outside of the frame, and you really have that central focus as if you were staring through a crystal ball. So things like that. Again, just sort of that feeling of like, oh, if Madame Leota's telling you a story, it should look like you're watching it through her crystal ball. Little things like that, But then again, I think the slow camera moves are just, there's a lot that has sort of the speed of the ride too.
Yes.
And you alluded to the shot as it sort of goes back and forth over the ballroom, but I think there was that feeling of like that speed of the ride. It's not a fast ride. Like it almost creates more dread because you don't know what's around the corner. You're sort of moving slowly at times. So I think there was a lot of intention in the camera movement by both Justin and Jeffrey to kind of deliver on that feeling.
Sure.
Did either one of you get to keep any props or costumes from the production?
I did.
Yeah, it's not a spoiler.
It's funny, we did have some of the statues that we put up in the library, so I kept one of those.
Nice.
And then there's these little banister things that I kept one of those too, and there's one thing from the Crop Banner. So
Which statues you got?
really creepy, like elongated one, but it works. It fits well on an office desk. So yeah.
Nice.
Is there anything?
You get anything?
Nothing.
There's probably still something.
I was in the editing room.
We can fix that.
I'm so curious, is there anything that you got access to through Disney or Disneyland that the the civilian, all of us, wouldn't have access to in making this film?
Certainly getting to see it with the lights on.
Sure.
That was really cool. We rode it once with the lights on. We got to walk through without the dune buggies moving and really just take our time and look at everything. We got to walk through with the lights off, which was, even cooler. And again, you sort of just get up close to the candelabra effect and you're like, how far is that down there?
Oh, that is cool.
Weirdly, that one actually surprised me. I thought that was totally an optical illusion with just mirrors and it's actually ways down there.
Really?
There's a big hallway. We actually got to walk down that hallway. Yes, there's extension of it with optical illusion, but even that one, I never really knew how they did it. And you're like, that's actually a really long hallway.
That's incredible.
That's kind of how they did it. Our other fun thing, though, we did right after wrap with Justin and the cast, we did a big cast dinner at Club 33. So I'd never been there before, so we got to do that and have a fun day at the park and have Danny get stopped by every single person in the park.
Of course.
Danny DeVito is the nicest man in the world, so literally everyone's like, Danny! He's like, okay, let me sign this. Danny! Okay. Everybody recognizes him, so we're like, unless we stop this, we are gonna make it 100 feet in about 3 hours, so.
And I knew people loved him, but I don't think I knew how much people loved him until we screened it the first time. And as soon as he was on screen, the whole audience, you just felt them just so happy, and you just felt the love going at the screen.
Yeah. Every time we've seen it so far, the people next to us are like, Danny DeVito! Like every single time. He's in the movie. I mean, what the heck? Well, speaking of that, we actually had the opportunity to see this thing in 4DX the other night, which if you haven't seen it in 4DX, my gosh. You feel those hot and cold running chills. That wind gusts cross your body left and right over this thing when ghosts are there. There's water, there's smoke, there's smells, your seat's getting punched and kicked and moving all around. It's amazing.
How's your back?
Yeah, right? Do you guys have that experience, or did you have that experience at all, like in the back of your mind while either in the edit or in the production, knowing that effect would be one of the ways that this film was released, or does that not occur to you at all?
I think it does only in so much as you're trying to make a movie that whether you watch it in 4DX or not, feels like you're watching it in 4DX. That it's experiential, that it's, even when we do the mix, you want those like rumbles in the mix and Dolby Atmos. You want to feel like, even when Hatbox comes down the hall for the first time, there's like some incredible ominous chords that our composer Chris Bowers created. Like you want those to just like get you to the bone, So I think when you're making the movie, you are trying to think about like what is the theatrical experience, and then I think the 4DX thing is just a really cool cherry on top to sort of make it even more sort of physical and there for the audience. But I do think we sort of think about that experience.
Yeah, it's just experiential. When I was told that the 4DX was happening, I was like, oh, and then I go through the movie thinking like, okay, what will they add to this moment? What will they add to this moment? And then our assistant editors went to check it out and said that's when I heard that it's very violent, the chair, which is why I asked about your back.
Without giving away any spoilers, what would be your favorite scene out of the movie to work on?
That's a good question. I mean, it is funny. It's what's your favorite one to work on, or what's your favorite one in the movie? I think maybe are different, you know?
Sure.
Like, I think to work on, honestly, is like shooting in the cemetery at Halloween is like the most fun to work on and to be there. I do think the library scene, the one that Philip alludes to, is maybe, it's such an emotional scene. It's sort of where Ben sort of confesses to everybody what happened to him, or more specifically what happened to his wife. But then it also has this incredible gallows humor. It's got Danny DeVito lands like a couple killer jokes. Owen Wilson has an incredible joke at the end of it. And I think that scene more than any, to me, does encapsulate that sort of grim, grinning ghost feel, you know? Like, how do you confront death? How do you laugh about it? How do you bond with people? How do you find fun in the face of tragedy? Like, how do you move on? I think that scene sort of does everything for me. So I think maybe that is just creatively my favorite scene in the movie.
That's a great answer.
My favorite scene probably is the sketch artist scene, just because that's the one that changed the least from when we edited it, when we started editing. That one's pretty much hasn't changed. And it was one of those scenes where when I got it, I was like, oh my god, anything that Danny says in it wasn't scripted. And you know, my initial thing is just like, how can I, you know, most easily put this together? And I was like, oh my god, Danny's talking over it. And I was like, oh, it is funny. Oh, that's funny. So as I kept on doing it, I was like, oh, he's really funny. And I was just like, I want to use Danny all the time. And then when he did the thing with the teeth, I was like, oh my god, this is gold. So it ended up being really fun to work on. Didn't really work on it much after that because we were all happy with it, and every time we played it, it played really well. In terms of what I kind of think ultimately enjoyed working on the most was when they're escaping the house in the car and the trees are attacking them. And just because that one just developed in a fun, interesting way with visual effects as we started making the trees come to life. And I just loved the feeling of the trees slamming down around the car, and there was some fun improv stuff that's gotten a little bit lost, but in the mix, but with them kind of yelling at each other. But I just loved it. It just felt like a total cacophony of insanity, and so I'd forgotten that there were trees like that in the ride until we went through it a few months ago. And I was like, oh my god.
Well, as far as getting that whole cast together, you're talking about the wild improv skills of people like Danny DeVito and all these great people who were working on it. Was there any anecdotes of things that were happening during production amongst the cast? Any hilarious moments or stories that either you guys got to witness, either being on set or heard about?
I mean, Danny's always the funniest person in the world. I mean, it's funny because when you make these movies, and I don't blame actors at all, but normally when you call cut, actors go back to their trailer, you know, and it's hard, it's a long day, and they've got to wait around a lot, so they go back. Danny's like, I'm too old to go back to my trailer. So he just sits down with you at your monitor, and he's like, let me tell you some stories. Do you want to know about Batman Returns? I'm like, I do. Tell me everything about the Penguin. And so that was sort of the most fun for me. It just like, he just sort of regales you with the history of Hollywood.
Oh, that's great.
And I have to say, it's so fun working with him because he just sits down and he's like, isn't this amazing? Look at where we are. Like, this is incredible that we get to do this, you know? And you're like,
so
Danny
cool.
DeVito at his age and the career he's had still sort of gets tickled by the magic of it. You know, it just makes, you know, making movies are stressful too, you know, and it's hard at times, and you sort of have to remind yourself, like, can't believe this is my job. I can't believe I get to do this. And when Danny DeVito reminds you of that, you're like, this is as good as it gets. So.
And you have not lived until you've seen Danny DeVito doing ADR when the actors come in to replace their dialogue. Just like, you know, give us something of you riding down on the chair. Just hearing him improv, we were crying with laughter. He's so funny. So funny.
My other favorite part was Jamie Lee Curtis came to record the first time for Madame Leota, and she was amazing. It was like perfect, you know, like this is incredible. And then she gets up and she's like, thank you, but just let me know when we have to do the whole thing all over again. It's like somebody who's been in this business for so long. She's like, I know how this works. You love it all now. You're gonna have me change all the lines. I'm gonna come back later. I got it. Just call me when you're gonna come back.
And she was right.
She's got it right.
We're gonna wrap it up with one last question. So what are the ideas for the expansion or return to the cinematic universe of the Haunted Mansion? Is there a sequel in mind? Is there any other ways of attacking this that you guys are familiar with or ready to go on?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to take it on, you know, so I think it sort of depends kind of on the run of the movie and audiences, and not only audiences finding the movie right now in theaters, but I think for the next couple of months to come, you know, I think there is certainly feeling, hopefully, as Halloween gets closer, that this continues to be a movie that that everyone can watch, and for me, again, I'm a parent of a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. I find that, when it's Thanksgiving time, 50 movies to watch with your family for Christmas. When it's Halloween, when it's sort of October 1st, it's like, well, you go back to the horror movies that you love if you want to get in the mood. But with kids, you don't really have that much to watch, and I always find like, I want to get my kids in the mood, and we end up watching Garfield's Halloween for the thing, It's like you want to watch a real movie with your kids and have that experience and get in the mood. And so I think hopefully for me, that's the thing that not only this year, but for many years to come, people will come back to with this movie. And the clock is rolling around to October 1st. And what are we going to do to get in the mood? And you've got your family, you can all watch this movie, and it's spooky and it's fun and it is scary, but it just kind of gets you in that mood. So I don't know, we'll see what the life of the movie is. Hopefully it would be great to revisit this world, these characters, get the band back together, it would be incredible. I do know that, there has been actually a Ryan Gosling Hitchhiking Ghost movie that Disney has been talking about. We're not involved in that one, but I know that's something else they've kicked around just in terms of the world of the Haunted Mansion. But it was an honor to sort of play in this space, and we'd love to do it again if we could.
Well, thank you guys both so much for giving us this experience. Incredible. One last thing.
You guys are officially appointed Boo Crew ambassadors. So when you go back to Disney, very, very important, we want you to tell the powers that be that we want the death certificates to make a comeback.
Let's bring back the death certificate. I love it. All right, Jonathan and Philip, thank you so much for your time and for your work on this stunner of a film. Thanks to everyone here for attending. Enjoy the rest of Midsummer Scream. See Disney's Haunted Mansion in theaters now, and see 40X too. It's amazing.